Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an HOA Karen claims that my beach house no longer belongs to me, but that instead the HOA is the rightful owner of my property. And in our second story, a guy repeatedly trespasses on my property and does illegal target practice on my land. So let me start out with how I got the property that the HOA thought they had a claim to. It was a beach house just a few hundred feet from the water located in a seaside town that is about 3 hours away from my current home. My grandparents owned it for a good half of their lives and would host their children and grandchildren in it for years. I had good memories of that house and the time I spent with my siblings and cousins. There were summers where everyone in our family tried to line our vacations up in order to spend that time together at the beach house. The adults would get up to whatever while all of the younger kids played in the sand and played in the tide pools. We would make sand castles and bask in the sun until it set. I loved those summers, and a part of me hoped that I'd be able to replicate them when I was old enough to bring my own children there. Of course, time passed and my grandfather and grandmother passed on. They passed away within a week of each other, so their funeral was a joint one. Their will was also something they had planned to initiate together, so it made things a bit easier for the family to say their last goodbyes at the same time. I was caught a bit off balance when their lawyer called me to attend the wills reading. My grandparents were not stingy with their inheritance and they passed along bonds, stocks and other large investments to their children and grandchildren. When it got to me, the lawyer explained that I was the owner of my grandparents' beach house. They had the deed in my name already, I just needed to provide my signature. I was so excited. The dreams I had of sharing the house with other members of my family were within reach, and when the deed was signed, I was ready to take the 3-hour trip down to the house to make sure it was maintained. My grandparents had a cleaning service come through every week to make sure the place was spotless, and I hired the group to continue their work. In the months between family gatherings I hosted there, I decided that it would be best to rent the place out as a getaway or summer vacation spot. Having that extra income became essential for upkeep of the house as well as providing for my own family. I know I explained a lot, but I wanted to make sure that you had all of the information before I went into detail about the HOA issues. I had been made aware of the HOA back when my grandparents still owned the place. They had apparently tried to get my grandparents to sell the beach house so that it could be a part of the HOA, but my grandparents wanted it to remain in the family. That did not stop someone from sending welcome packets in the mail, but they were ignored. Once I got ownership of the house, there was one person in particular that seemed very insistent that the place would be better if under the HOA. Well, of course, we're gonna call this woman Karen because she was one in the broadest sense of the term. To all the ladies that share the same name as Karen, I'm sorry. Karen sent welcome packets as well as several emails to me. I still to this day don't know how she got my email address asking about purchasing the property. I shut it down though, and I told her to stop contacting me about it. For a while it worked, and for a few months I didn't think the HOA was gonna be that much of an issue. I wanna say about a year into my ownership of the house, 2 of my renters called me in a panic one morning claiming that someone had come up to their door and talked about them getting removed from the property. Apparently, Karen told them that the HOA owns the beach house, and because they were not properly keeping up with their dues, Karen was going to have the renters removed along with anything not nailed down. I did not waste any time grabbing the important paperwork for that property and driving over 3 hours to the beach house to help my renters. The entire time I was on edge. What the hell was the HOA trying to do? How could someone just lie and try to scare people into giving up an entire house? I drove to the beach house expecting the worst. I could already tell that there was something going on at the front of the house from the amount of cars and trucks parked there, but decided instead to take the backdoor entrance just to check up on my renters. They were grateful that I came and told me more about what had happened. Apparently, Karen had not only knocked on their door earlier, but had been passing notes and messages under the door about how they were supposed to vacate the property. I asked them to gather up everything and to wait in the house while I tried to talk to Karen. I consider myself a fairly calm person, but of course some things can rattle me enough that I can raise my voice. I've worked in education for over a decade, so I feel like I've become a master at masking my emotions so that I don't piss someone off. I kept my expression blank as I walked out the front door towards Karen. There was a moving truck in front of my beach house and she was talking with a group of people in matching shirts that I assumed were the moving crew she had hired. A few of them looked away from her and caught my eye as I approached. As I got closer, I could hear what she was saying. Karen, and everything should be cleared out in less than 3 hours, got it? I'm not paying extra to have you take your time on this. Me, excuse me? Karen, stopping in her tirade to turn towards me. What do you want? Can't you see I'm busy? Me, ma'am, I own this property and I think I should be asking you why you are here to begin with. Karen, the only owner of this property is the HOA. I will have to ask you to leave. Me again, ma'am, I think you're mistaken. This property is not part of an HOA. It's been in my family for decades, and I think I would have known if they decided to sell it off to an HOA or someone else. Karen, this property has been under HOA jurisdiction for 3 years. The board finally decided to act against the renters here to get paid what was due. Me, again, I've had this property for a year, pulling out the deed, and before this my grandparents owned the property. I'm gonna ask you again to leave. Karen, and I'm gonna call the police. How dare you think I'm lying? And that piece of paper doesn't mean anything if the HOA has owned this property for years. I just shrugged as she took out her phone, but I was starting to get a bit angry. There wasn't any logic to her argument, and I hoped that the police would understand this. The movers stayed where they were, Karen yelling at them that they were not getting paid to sit around. Well, I asked them to stay just to have witnesses if something else happened. I went back into the house to let the renters know what was happening and to get all of the things that Karen had sent them so the police could see what she'd been doing. The officers arrived a couple minutes later. They heard her side first and I could already tell that Karen is laying it out like I've been harassing her this whole time. When they get to me, I show them the house paperwork and the things she had sent my renters. I told them that the HOA had no claim over the place, and if Karen was insisting I had no right to the property, I would just take her to court. The police believed me, especially with my evidence, and asked if I needed help getting her off the property. That in return set Karen off. She started to yell at the officers, claiming that she had not been lying. She started cursing me out, claiming I was a squatter and that the property was the HOA's. It felt like I was watching someone breaking down in a movie. She was so overdramatic. The officers did their best to de-escalate the situation, but she only got angrier. The movers packed up and headed out, getting a clear indication that Karen had hired them on false pretenses. Karen continued to accuse me of other strange crimes like owing her money for the privilege of being near the HOA. All in all though, the police ended up having to arrest her and take her to the station. They did ask if I wanted to press charges, and I told them I did. I checked in with the renters to make sure that they were not too shaken up. They thanked me for actually coming down to help them and making sure they were alright. I decided to waive their fees for their time in the beach house and let them stay for an extra week. It was the least I could do. They should not have had to deal with someone like Karen during their vacation. I filed a suit against Karen along with a few other homeowners that were not a part of the HOA, and apparently my property was not the only one she had tried to claim belonged to the HOA. The renters had made sure to let the other property owners know that I was the one who finally called Karen's bluff and got her arrested. That gave them the confidence to press charges against her as well without feeling like they were gonna be bullied for it. I'm sure the suit was salt on the wound at that point, but I wanted Karen to know what she had done to me and the surrounding property owners that did not feel safe with the HOA so close. We won of course and got a pretty large settlement for the things she had done. I didn't give any thought to Karen until about a month ago. I did not want to give her the satisfaction of taking up part of my mind while I didn't have to deal with her again, but I was curious to learn if anything happened to her after the lawsuit. And well, apparently she had to sell the house she had in the HOA near my beach home in order to pay part of the settlement, and there was not a single trace of her left on the HOA's website. And yeah guys, if you enjoyed this story, please stay for the next one, where a serial trespasser takes a weapon to OP's property and then sues OP for getting hurt while trespassing. So let's dive right into the next one. We moved out of an apartment 2 months early, school housing contracts. Since we couldn't get anyone to move in for only 2 months, we were on the hook for the 2 months of rent, which was a fortune to poor college students. We were told by the on-site manager, also a poor college student being paid in free rent, that we'd be responsible for the electricity bills in the apartment over the next 2 months despite already doing our official move out. We were told, no, they cannot be changed back to the landlord's name. Fine, I'll pay the electricity bills, but I'll make sure they are zero. So when we left, I turned off all the breakers. I still had the keys because we were supposed to mail them back to the property owner at our expense, since I guess he lives far away and only comes into town at the beginning and end of each semester. A few days later we realized we had forgotten some items in the bathroom, and since the apartment was on my way to school, I decided to swing by and grab them before mailing the keys back. When I walked in, I was startled to find someone inside. It was the property owner with a box of tools looking very dirty. Apparently the hall lights were not working and in violation of building safety codes, and he could not figure out why. The security system also seemed to be non-functional. It looked like something had tripped all the breakers, he said. I said yeah, that something was me since the electric bill was still in our name. He pointed out that not powering the hallway light was a safety concern, and also that having the power off would ruin the refrigerator. I pointed out that I could not care less about the safety of an apartment I did not live in. I had already signed move-out documents saying that all the appliances were in good shape, and also that him being there was technically a landlord violation since we were still paying rent and he had not given us notice that he'd be entering the apartment. We looked at each other for a few seconds. I was wondering if I was technically trespassing or not since I'd already signed move-out papers. He was probably thinking about how much time he had wasted for something like 13 cents worth of electricity and how he could not really stop me from simply dropping by any day after school to turn the breakers off again. Finally, he said he'd take the electric bill out of our name. I grabbed my loofah and left and didn't hear anything about it ever again. Most importantly, I never paid another cent, except of course in 2 months of rent, but small victories. Edit, this happened over a decade ago and I'm now a homeowner several states away. I'm not gonna pursue any legal action. I've been relatively successful in life and my time is worth more than I would ever get out of it. I was surprised that the outside hallway light, which was a public area, was affected by the breaker inside the apartment. It definitely sounds like that's illegal or at least against standard wiring practices. I did my final walkthrough and signed off with the on-site manager, not the property owner. I'd actually never met the property owner before. Also, we were moving to a newer, much nicer apartment on a long-term lease where we didn't pay for electricity. We actually never ended up having an electric bill in that state in our name ever again. By the way, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, is that common that you don't have to pay the electric bill if you rent a place? I've never heard about that before. Sounds very convenient if you ask me. Anyway, I'm not actually sure if the electric bill was in our name or if they were just gonna deduct any electric charges from our deposit or some third-party option. I don't remember. I just remember I was gonna be charged for electricity after we moved out and I thought it was stupid. There were multiple items left in the bathroom, including a towel that was part of a matching set, and I just remember the loofah most distinctly, and it made for a great sentence. And yes, I could have just propped the door to the fridge and freezer open to prevent mold, but I didn't think of that. I'm also not sure what I would have propped them open with, since the apartment was completely empty. And yes, this was petty, that's kind of the point of the subreddit. Yes, I'm not sure I was 100% in the right, thus the awkward stare part of the story. I still feel I was justified in turning off the breakers and I'd do it again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, would you think that OP was justified in what he did or not? Let me know in the comments. And now let's continue with the entitled serial trespasser story of today. So one thing that I don't nearly hear enough about is when people have a rural property in an area that is not so rural anymore and everybody thinks they have a right to it. So over many years I've had to chase away people that think my land is just a free field they can do anything they want in. Instead of private property and signs saying that it's private property, they never seem to work well as half the people either cannot read or don't care. I never get mad at single-time offenders that might not know they are on my property. If I see people, I kindly explain it to them, point out the nearest sign and let them go on their merry way. It's the people that keep coming back and don't have any respect that are the ones that I cannot stand the most. And this one entitled jerk, who I will call Ken, was the worst. Now, Ken felt like since my land was the only real rural area without driving about 15 minutes, that it was meant perfect for him to use. Specifically for two uses. One as a running trail to get some exercise, and second, to set up targets and practice shooting. Acting not even like he's my guest, but that it is his property. I've kicked him off fairly calmly for the running before, but when I caught him shooting on my property, it was a different story. Me, whoa, you cannot be doing that here. I've told you before that you need to stay off my property. Ken, you need to back up before you get hurt. I want to practice and you cannot just decide who is and is not allowed to use the park. Me, this is not a park, it's my land and I've told you nicely several times. And now you're showing up here with guns and potentially putting people in danger. Ken, I saw only 2 days ago right here this entire area filled with a bunch of kids playing soccer. Me, those were my kids and their friends they invited over. I get the final say in who gets to be on my property, and you are not welcome on it ever again. I want you to pack up your stuff and get out before I call the police for you coming to my home with a gun. He actually packed up and left, but I knew it was not the last time I was gonna see or hear from Ken. He still believed he had the right to be on my property, and I decided that I was gonna do something that Ken just could not ignore. I had to make sure it was legal first, and I followed about 1 million guidelines before it was ready. During which time I caught Ken on camera trespassing on my land about 4 more times. Now, a big ugly electric fence was put up around my property, with cameras, warnings and a bunch of signs, with of course appropriate ways for people to get in and out that belonged there. I was not trying to build some crazy weird fortress or something. It was not electrified yet, but it was up with the signs when I caught Ken on camera sneaking up with a rifle. I actually filed a police report for trespassing with a weapon and was told that they would speak to him. I don't know what was said, but it clearly didn't work because Ken came back all prepared to practice with his gun some more. This time the fence was on and he got the shock of his life from it. He was beyond angry and started pointing his gun and shooting right through the fence towards my house. I called the police, who came fast and got a still raging Ken to the ground and in handcuffs. He managed to even punch an officer, giving him a bloody nose, which makes me also question with his behavior and moods if Ken was on drugs or steroids or something, contributing to it all. Now he had to go to trial for all of that, but instead of focusing on not going to jail, he decided that he was gonna try and sue me for assault, claiming that him shooting was self-defense and trying to get his charges limited to just maybe hitting the officer. The court situation because of him trying to sue me also made things a little bit more difficult, so I'm just gonna simplify it to avoid being here all day and typing out the entire court play by play. A lot of it wasn't that exciting or important, with just a lot of camera footage showing him trespassing and even him trying and failing to climb over the electric fence. Then a lawyer hit him with this question that caused everything to collapse for him. Lawyer, are you saying that you denied trespassing onto OP's property repeatedly? Ken, I've never been on his property, I was just minding my own business and he got cut off. Lawyer, so all these videos of you coming onto the property that have been submitted to the court are not accurate? Is that man in the video you? Ken, yes, it's me. I go there to practice my shooting and get a good trail run in. I want to stay in shape and you act like it's a crime. Lawyer, you admit to the trespassing allegations? Ken, you don't know anything. Trespassing means that I went into his guy's house, and there's not a single video showing me doing that. Just that I got near it doesn't mean that I went in his house. And yeah, he was using the old-fashioned outside means public property excuse to try and claim otherwise. Still trying to say that the electric fence was an assault on my part and they couldn't zone out a park and get to decide who used it or not. Even the courts were having a hard time getting it through his head that he couldn't just go on my property and do whatever he wanted. That it was actually private and me fencing it off was perfectly fine in my state. Since Ken didn't have the ability to keep his cool for 3 seconds, he started going on a rant, cursing everybody out and needing to be removed from the room because he wouldn't shut his mouth. Other than that, the rest of the court was, I guess, standard and talking about general trespassing, resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. Nothing that I think warrants getting any main focus. The only other quick thing people might wonder about is if he got in trouble for having a gun, because I know some places are strict with that. He did own the gun legally and had a license to carry it. Obviously, after this whole ordeal, he was not allowed to have one again due to a felony arrest now under his belt. I would have thought he would be sent to prison for a good amount of time, but actually it was a little underwhelming. He was only given a year in jail before being allowed to re-enter society. I can also imagine when he gets out, no officer is gonna take things easy on him after he punched one of their own. I was just glad I didn't need to spend the rest of my life running and chasing this idiot off of my property anymore. Final note is that I know some of you might get upset about me having an electric fence. Just know that I had it pretty much just to shock Ken and I don't keep it actually connected to power anymore. It's more of a symbol, but I don't want people to actually get hurt even if they are ignoring the signs. If I ever get another Ken, I can power it up again and teach that guy a lesson as well. And yeah, ripe stars, I would not say that OP was an a-hole or anything for getting an electric fence. I think that is one of the best things you can get when you have a serial trespassing neighbor idiot. Either way, the next one is a malicious compliance story. Years ago, I got an odd weekend call from a former coworker, Keith. His parents were elderly and needed help, so he had resigned to move home and help care for them. After some niceties about how the move went and how the kids were doing in Nowhere, Ohio, I finally got him to spit out why he had called. Keith, see, Anne, his former boss, has gone scorched earth. She took my resignation personally, and now she is making it impossible to return all the company equipment I have. Me? What do you mean? Impossible? Keith, well, before the move I tried to set up a time to drop it at the office, and Anne, through her secretary, told me that if I set foot on the property, she would have me trespassed. Me, ouch. Keith, so I FedExed it. 3 boxes cost me almost $300 with insurance. She refused delivery and they arrived back on my porch this morning. Me, Christ. The company normally pays for shipping for stuff like that, so I can set up a pickup if you like. Keith, she will just refuse it again. What would be helpful is a copy of the employee manual. I have one, but it's in a box in the garage and, well, I email over a copy and Keith asks me an odd question. Will any of our number will be attending next week's convention in Cleveland? Me, well, if the calendar is right, the VP of Sales, Irish Terry from Marketing, and Anne are all going. Why? You trying to avoid them? Keith, oh no, just wanted a heads up, that's all. Enter the malicious compliance. See, the employee manual said Keith had to return his equipment to his boss. It did not specify where, when or how, and was furious when, on the first day of the convention, Keith strolled over to their booth with a hand truck and, after some chit-chat with the VP, asked her to sign a receipt for the 2 laptops, monitor and fax machine. According to Irish Terry, the VP's presence was the only reason Anne's ensuing screaming fit did not devolve into violence. Violence or no, her screaming on the convention floor was embarrassing enough to the VP that he sent Anne home early, with the 3 big boxes of Keith's returned stuff in tow. And the next one is another malicious compliance story. Briefly, during the pandemic, I worked as a manager at a Ralph's, a New York City area ice cream chain, and one night as I'm helping out scooping, I hear a customer getting annoyed at the window and starting to get snippy with one of the young kids who was working the window, so of course I head over to smooth the situation as manager. The woman is mad because the hot fudge on her hot fudge sundae is hot and is gonna melt the ice cream. I explained to her that hot fudge is indeed served hot, but she insists, so I make her a new sundae with magic shell topping instead and let her keep the hot fudge one. By the time I return with that, this customer is stirring her spoon through another cup of cream ice, kind of like a sherbet, she ordered, obviously about to complain about it too. The flavor she ordered was called Graham Crunch, and she proceeded to tell me that there wasn't any Graham Crunch in it. That she orders this flavor all the time and she knows that I'm intentionally stiffing her. I tell her that this is just how the flavor is and I don't name or make the ice cream, but she is not having it. She wants me to fix it. So we've got some crushed Graham cracker topping in the back, and as she is berating me, I just walk away from her and grab the entire container and come back to the window with it. At this point, we've got a line of people down the block because this lady has held us up, so there are lots of witnesses to what I was about to do. Without breaking eye contact with her, as she continues to tell me that I'm wrong about the ice cream, I scoop 6 days a week, I open the lid of the container and empty the entire thing over her cup of the offending ice cream. Graham crackers are everywhere and her ice cream is now definitely crunchy. She loses her mind at this and starts yelling at me. She knows the owner and will get me fired. I tell her, yeah, Steve is a nice guy. And she responds with, I've known Steve a long time. To which I respond, well, his name is John. Now get out of here, don't bother my employees for free ice cream again. Now sufficiently embarrassed in front of the long line of customers, the lady leaves in a huff and indeed never returns. The next few customers left us $20 tips in the jar to make up for her, so the kids who worked for me left with quite a bit more in their pockets than they normally would and realized that their manager had their back. And yeah, ripe stars, props to OP for being such a legendary manager. That is the kind of manager I would like to work under. Of course only if I would not be self-employed. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. And the first one starts like this. For some people, the word no seems to just be theoretical and not actually understood. This must have been the case with Karen, the woman who ran the HOA in my area. No matter how many times I said no to this woman, it was like she didn't understand the word. Like it was bleeped out in her mind or something and she had no idea it was even said. She did not fight about anybody telling her no, just acted and moved on as if we said yes. From that start, you can tell that I don't like Karen, but I have a very good reason to hate her. I was not a part of the HOA that she ran and did not feel like being part of it was in my benefit. She did not seem to actually do anything with the money collected from people, no community projects or helping anybody out, just trying to find people and let the money in the HOA collection grow for no end purpose we could see. And well, I was not about to contribute to that, and I also was not about to let Karen have any kind of control over me. You have to understand, she is the kind of person you run from, not give authority over you to. She wanted me in the HOA though, and was gonna try everything in her bag of tricks in order to get me to join. She was desperate, but it was not actually because she wanted money. She did not even want me in the HOA so she could say everybody joined or to praise herself. No, she was actually interested in my land and felt like if I joined the HOA, it could benefit her in the long run. I know this because she flat out told me one day when I was trying to get her to leave my property. Me, I told you already that I don't want to be part of the HOA. Karen, oh, the HOA is so great and I know you will be happy to be a part of it. Your land is very important to us. Me, really? My land has some special importance, you're right. Karen, if you look right in our bylaws, it shows that if the HOA buys a property that is also part of the HOA, we can get it cheaper. The reasoning is complicated and I'm sure you wouldn't understand. Me, I understand what you're talking about. Even if I was gonna join, I have no intention of selling you my property. Now please leave. I closed the door on her, which I think is the only version of no that might get through her head. Maybe it's all the hairspray she uses messing with her brain. Anyway, now that I know why she wants me, I was more strict than ever when it came to not wanting to join the HOA. I was getting into constant arguments with her, and I guess it finally got through that I didn't want to join them and she was not getting my property. I did not figure this out because she stopped, but instead because she decided to do something crazy. I woke up one day to find a semi-trailer just sitting right in the middle of my farmland. For those that don't know what a semi-trailer is, you might be more familiar with the term semi-truck. For this story, they are almost interchangeable. Anyway, it was big and it took up a ton of space and I wanted it gone ASAP. I was angry, and since I had cameras on my farm because of animals, I saw that she was one of 2 people on my property when it was placed. The other one ended up being a random guy she hired to drive the thing, and he was under the assumption that it was her property. I told her flat out to remove it and she refused, thinking she was so slick. I wanted to get it towed, but even that took a few days because they needed more specialized equipment to tow a semi than just a normal car. I was also debating suing Karen for pulling that stunt, but I did not get a chance before she made the first move. She was furious that I had the semi towed away and actually sued me for it. I thought she was about to Uno reverse herself and just sue herself for me because she was the one who parked the semi on my farm illegally in the first place. And well, my lawyer at first agreed until we got something into evidence that changed everything rather quickly. It was a signed letter stating that she was allowed to park on my farm, and at the bottom was the sloppy signature that bore my name. Now, I did not sign that, and despite it being pretty close, it was not my exact handwriting. Her entire side of the lawsuit was claiming that I owed her money for the semi and illegally towing it because she had written permission by me, going so far as to claim that she had given me money to park there and I still went and towed her. Of course, she claimed paying in cash, so it would be harder to prove. My biggest piece of evidence was that video, but that was useless if the court believed her fake papers. First, I had to prove that I never signed that paper or tried to show that the agreement was not valid. The good news for me was that the paper was not notarized, so at least that let doubts be raised about the whole thing. Second, we had to get an expert in the court to analyze my handwriting and see if my signature on the letter matched my writing pattern. He said that I did not sign the agreement, but then Karen's lawyer started trying to fight even that. They were dragging the entire thing out as long as possible, but in the end the court ruled that the letter was forged. Finally, I was able to use my video to prove that she was the one that had the semi parked on my farm intentionally. They even managed to track down the guy who drove it, who testified that Karen did pay him, but he had no idea it was somebody else's property. I don't blame the guy because he really did not know. Karen, on the other hand, was out of any logical defenses. She caved and admitted that she wanted use of my farm property, but since I would not join the HOA, I was making that impossible. She was telling her story of how the land needed to be sold or given to them in order to use it for the HOA community, trying to gain sympathy and pretend like her actions had some good intentions behind it. Law does not work that way, and in the end she did commit a crime by forging documents and trespassing on my property. Things got even crazier though once the court looked a little bit deeper into Karen. Now, for the forgery and trespassing, she probably would not have gone to jail. They found her plans to use my farmland to build homes and put them in her name, not the HOA despite them being the ones who would pay for it, and then be able to make a profit. Basically, her entire spiel was to try and scam HOA funds to benefit herself, and that was the last straw. She was sent to prison for 2 years, but even just being guilty was enough to ruin her. She was never gonna be able to join an HOA again or even show her face in the neighborhood. Since writing this, she should have gotten out but never returned to live here. My guess is she tried to go and start a new life and maybe even join a new HOA. I wanna think that she learned her lesson, but I believe that somebody like her cannot. At the very least, I hope that in prison she learned how to understand the word no, or she would have been in some serious trouble. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.